The man had been an athlete once, lithe and strong from years of wrestling, but now his body is broken and useless, forgotten on the cold stones of a Spartan prison. Did he ever know he would end up here? How did he fall so low? As we listen to the old slave, the fire in his eyes burning with stories of the past, we hear about Leonidas, the dashing Spartan general. What did he have to do with this forgotten man? And what was his role in the events that led to the Battle of Thermopylae? Was he the hero of Sparta, or was there more to the story? In the 7th century BC, the Spartans' reputation for martial prowess was growing steadily, while the rest of Greece was pursuing intellectual and artistic achievements. The Spartans focused solely on military training. Every male citizen was a warrior from childhood until old age. They fought with weapons, participated in hunts, and were taught to endure pain and hardship. Girls received some education, unlike women in other city states, but they were still expected to be good wives and mothers, teaching them skills like cooking and weaving. However, as soon as someone was born, their character was assessed. If they were healthy, they were brought up within the community, but any weakness resulted in abandonment on Mount Tagatos. This fate was called apotheosis, and the parents saw it as an act of mercy rather than a cruel decision. Imagine the fear every mother and father had to endure during those first moments after their child's birth. Would their baby survive, or would they have to abandon them? Leonidas wasn't just a great fighter, he was also an ambitious leader who wanted to expand Sparta's borders and influence. He led his army to conquer the northeast Peloponnese, including the city of Thera. It's here that he allegedly captured a man named Demaratus, a former prince who was banished from Corinth after a failed attempt to reclaim the throne. Demaratus fell under Leonidas's spell. We don't know if the general was captivated by his intellect, charm, or cunning, but he took him back to Sparta as a concubine. This wasn't anything new. Concubines weren't uncommon in Greek culture, but what made Demaratus unique? In history books, we read about how Leonidas paraded him around at parties, showing off his wit and intelligence. Perhaps he chose Demaratus because he needed a companion who could match his mind as well as his bed. After all, the best way to please a warrior is not always with physical pleasure, but with stimulating conversation and shared meals. However, this arrangement didn't last long. Soon enough, Demaratus caught Leonidas's fancy and became his favorite, while ordinary concubines were considered property, bought and sold like slaves. Demaratus gained favor and access. He participated in political discussions, receiving invitations to important gatherings where nobles presented their plans and strategies. When someone had Leonidas's ear, they had the entire kingdom's attention. Not everyone approved of Demaratus's presence, though. The queen mother, Tyro, plotted against him, poisoning her son's mind and turning him against his concubine. She accused Demaratus of plotting with Persia, hoping to usurp the throne. Although the charge was false, Leonidas ordered the concubine to be put to death. The executioners led him outside the city walls to a place called the Vale of Death. There, under the guise of a friendly hunting trip, he had ambushed and killed his concubine, throwing his body into a nearby pit. This dark deed cast a shadow over Leonidas. He couldn't escape the feeling that he had betrayed a trusted friend. The guilt gnawed at him, and soon enough, he heard Demaratus's spirit calling out to him, haunting his dreams and waking him in cold sweats. Unable to bear the weight of his actions any longer, Leonidas returned to the Vale of Death. He retrieved Demaratus's remains and gave him a proper burial, finally finding peace. Some say that even after his death, Demaratus continued to help Leonidas, guiding him to victory in battles against the Persians. Others believe that when the Persian king Xerxes invaded Greece, Demaratus appeared before Leonidas at the hot springs of Thermopylae, urging him to make a stand against the invaders. Maybe that is where Leonidas got the strength and courage to gather 300 warriors and hold off thousands of Persians for 3 days. But there are also different versions of the story. According to Plutarch, Leonidas had no part in conquering Thera. Instead, he brought back a captive named Mestri, whom he took as his concubine. Mestri had come from a long line of Thessalian kings and was a skilled rider and charioteer, which fascinated Leonidas. Mestri is said to have loved Leonidas too, but he never forgot his roots. He told the king about the customs and traditions of Thessaly and urged Leonidas to visit the region. During a battle, Mestri saved his master's life, but was killed by an enemy spear. Leonidas mourned the loss of his concubine, realizing he hadn't appreciated the depth of their bond until it was too late. Whether the concubine's name was Demaratus or Mestri, he was more than just a nameless captive in Sparta. He was a philosopher, an advisor, and a lover. His story shows how same-sex relationships developed in ancient Greece, going beyond the common image of the predatory older man exploiting a young boy. It was a complex world where power dynamics, love, and personal growth intersected. Unfortunately, we know little about him because these types of relationships were viewed through the lens of the dominant culture. The male concubine's perspective and feelings are often ignored, overshadowed by the desires and whims of the ruling class. They erased his identity, leaving us with nothing more than names and a handful of details. These stories were part of the oral tradition passed down through the generations, gradually taking shape and changing as they were retold. Ancient Greek writers weren't interested in recording historical facts, but rather used these tales to teach moral lessons. They created stories of great men like Leonidas, focusing on their legendary deeds, not everyday life. Consequently, the average Spartan citizen knows little about the struggles and complexities faced by those around him. Let's look at another example. While Thucydides wrote extensively about the Peloponnesian War, he didn't mention homosexuality. Xenophon was the first to address the subject, describing how older men pursued young boys. However, he only portrayed it in the context of pederastic relationships, where the mentor-like figure guides the young boy to adulthood. He also didn't consider homosexual behavior shameful. Love between two consenting adults was seen as natural and inevitable, even encouraged among the elite, as a way to continue the bloodline. At banquets, men would compete to see who could attract the most beautiful boy, often offering expensive gifts to win his favor. The poets sang about the joys of love and desire, making this lifestyle seem normal, yet none of these accounts offered the concubine's point of view. Concubines were mentioned in passing, described as prized possessions or objects of ridicule. In short, they were rarely given a voice. The term concubine in Greek is paidika, meaning boy, but it's often translated as male prostitute. However, this translation is inaccurate. Paidika were not sex workers. They sold their services in taverns and brothels, whereas concubines were kept by wealthy men or high-ranking officials. They had no choice in the matter. A freeborn boy could choose to become a concubine, but if a man purchased a slave at the market, he automatically became his property. The concubine's owner decided when and how he would satisfy his desires. In Athens, male concubines were prominent in political and cultural life, often enjoying privileges denied to others. They attended festivals, competed in athletic events, and were involved in religious ceremonies. However, their position was precarious. Wealthy Athenians kept multiple concubines and could easily discard one for another. Many spent their final days as servants or prostitutes to make ends meet. When studying history, it's essential to acknowledge the silence of the past. Ancient Greeks glorified male beauty in poetry and art, depicting idealized figures like the nude youths of Paestum vases. However, behind the scenes, there was a darker reality. Powerful men exploited their authority to possess and abuse young boys. Sadly, we can't hear their voices or perspectives in historical records. The past doesn't always teach us what we want to hear, but it's crucial to recognize the truth. By doing so, we honor the silenced stories and ensure they're not forgotten.